a somber November morning in 1978, deep within the Guyana rainforest, Reverend Jim Jones orchestrated an act so chilling and shocking it would etch itself into the darkest pages of American history. This event, which saw the loss of hundreds of American lives, including that of a U.S. congressman, wouldn't be overshadowed until the Twin Towers fell over 2 decades later. Here, we venture into a story of horror. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Jim Jones was born on May 13, 1931, in the quaint agricultural town of Crete, Indiana. His father, James Thurman Jones, a World War I veteran haunted by the nightmares of trench warfare, and his mother, Lynette Putnam, younger by 15 years and previously married, struggled to make ends meet. While his parents toiled, his father on the railroads, his mother in the factories and housekeeping, young Jim Jones roamed free, charming the neighbors with his sociable nature. As Jim grew, he found a peculiar joy in the company of children younger than himself, not for friendship, but for control. His charisma was undeniable. He could captivate anyone around him, yet beneath this charm lurked darker traits. Jim Jones was fascinated by death, staging mock funerals for animals he had killed, and played the roles of notorious dictators like Hitler, preaching bizarre sermons to his young audience about sex and sin. Influenced by the strict Protestantism of his surroundings, Jim decided his calling was to be a preacher. He quickly garnered a following among the youth, filling them with tales of hellfire and damnation, his voice echoing with an eerie blend of charisma and doom. At just 16, Jim Jones met Marceline Baldwin, a woman 5 years his senior, working as a student nurse at Reed Memorial Hospital in Richmond. Their union was quick. They married in 1949, the very year Jim graduated high school. Together, they embarked on higher education at Indiana University, with Jim pursuing education and Marceline pursuing nursing. Only 3 years later, however, Jim would abandon his studies and become a student minister, seeking converts for the Methodist Church. His tenure there was brief. He renounced Methodism when they refused to welcome black converts he brought to services. Since childhood, Jim had championed social equality, his earliest friends being the black children he played with in his neighborhood. Rejected by local churches for his inclusive beliefs, Jim founded the People's Temple in 1956. There, he wove together elements of Leninism, Christianity, and Buddhism into a unique doctrine, preaching through sermons that captured the hearts with their inclusivity and fervor. His church was the sanctuary for all, and his charisma made him not just a leader, but a deity in the eyes of his followers. As years passed, Jim's sermons grew more intense, infused with a burning passion for social justice, civil rights, and equality. He was a man on a mission, and his sermons echoed his determination to change the world. One of his powerful declarations captured this perfectly. "Nobody's going to come out of the sky. There's no heaven up there. We'll have to make heaven down here." This was more than rhetoric. It was Jim's manifesto and his call to action for a utopia on Earth. Driven by a mix of fear and ambition, Jim Jones led his followers to Ukiah, Mendocino County, in California. While he justified the move as an escape from the looming threat of nuclear attack during the Cold War's peak, when every American lived under the shadow of potential Soviet annihilation, the underlying motive was to exploit California's welfare system. With his congregation largely composed of the underprivileged, Jim could redirect government aid meant for his followers back into his own pockets, fueling his vision for a grand church. Initially, the locals viewed Jones and his group as mere eccentrics, but this perception soon transformed. Jim was not just spending his amassed funds, he was actually investing in the community. He established soup kitchens, cared for the elderly, ran a clothing pantry, and fought for social justice, which even influenced local businesses to abandon discriminatory practices. Jim wasn't just a preacher, he was becoming a local hero, beloved for his deeds. As the People's Temple expanded, so did Jim's influence. With newfound resources, he opened branches in San Francisco and Los Angeles, ultimately relocating the headquarters to a building on Gary Boulevard in San Francisco. Here, Jim's charismatic leadership caught the eye of the city's political elite. He cultivated relationships with them, gaining their respect and support. Willie Brown, the 41st mayor of San Francisco, likened Jim to a composite of Martin Luther King Jr., Einstein, and Mao Zedong in his speeches. His reputation soared, reaching the ears of Governor Jerry Brown, who praised his activism, and even First Lady Rosalind Carter, who lauded his community work. Amidst all the commendable deeds of the People's Temple, dark fissures began to surface. Former members whispered of an all-encompassing paranoia, especially within Jones himself. It became clear that Jim's charisma was not just a tool for inspiration, but also for manipulation, preying on people's deepest fears: financial ruin, racial strife, personal insecurities. This was all in order to ensure their allegiance. These weren't the only shadows cast over the temple. Disturbing tales emerged of physical violence, blackmail, and the coercion of members to relinquish all their possessions to Jim, rendering them utterly dependent on his so-called benevolence. But the revelations grew more sinister, with stories of sexual manipulation. Jim, revered as a deity, dictated celibacy for some while forcing others into unwanted sexual partnerships. His demands for sexual loyalty, regardless of age or gender, was a terrifying test of devotion. Refusal was met with severe punishment. The iron grip Jim held over his followers was undeniable, and those who escaped spoke of the People's Temple as an evil cult, its facade of charity masking a dark core. As these rumors proliferated, Jim's paranoia spiraled. Convinced that escape was the only salvation for himself and his congregation, he envisioned an Eden in the Guyanese jungle, a place where only they could live in peace, far from the corrupt U.S. government and its prying eyes of the CIA and FBI, which he believed were conspiring against him. In 1974, Jones inked a 25-year lease with the Guyanese government for 3,852 acres of land near the Venezuelan border, envisioning a utopia. He sent a cadre of his most dedicated and skilled followers to forge a socialist paradise in the jungle, a place where the People's Temple could thrive in peace. They toiled tirelessly, transforming the wilderness into a semblance of an Eden. Roads were laid, simple wooded cottages rose from the ground, a communing dining hall was erected, and essential infrastructure like agricultural centers and medical facilities were established. Mike Touche, one of these pioneers, proudly stated, "We built a community out of nothing in 4 years." When the construction was done, Jim, with a stroke of ego, named this new world Jonestown. Initially, Jonestown seemed to embody the dream. There was an abundance of food, medical care was accessible, and despite the harsh jungle surroundings, living conditions were surprisingly decent. Jim's followers reveled in this new life. However, beneath this veneer of success lurked Jim's unyielding desire for control. On January 1st, 1976, Jim initiated what was known as a White Night, a chilling rehearsal for mass suicide. In the dead of night, all members were roused and made to drink a supposedly deadly concoction, which in the end turned out to be harmless. However, this act was not just a test of loyalty, but a stark reminder of the power Jim wielded over life and death. The facade began to crumble on August 1st, 1977, when New West magazine from Los Angeles published an expose that peeled back the layers of Jim Jones and the People's Temple. The article unveiled the dark underbelly of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, supported by over 30 first-hand accounts from former members. It also included desperate communications from temple advocates demanding the magazine halt its investigation. Notables like Lieutenant Governor Mervyn DeMalley and gay rights activist Harvey Milk were listed in the transcripts, showing how deep Jones's influence ran. However, Jones was one step ahead. He had learned of the impending expose and preemptively ordered a mass exodus to Jonestown in Guyana. In a calculated move to escape scrutiny, nearly 1,000 temple members, including Jim himself, relocated to the jungle before the magazines even reached newsstands. This desperate act was not just about evading accountability, but also about tightening his grip on his followers in an isolated environment where Jim's word was law. Upon arrival in Jonestown, newcomers were immediately stripped of their autonomy. They had to surrender all personal belongings, including medication and passports, to Jim's greeting committee, effectively locking them into his world. By this time, Jim was consumed by delusions, his paranoia sky high, fueled by a cocktail of drugs like LSD, Valium, and speed. For those now trapped in Jonestown, the future looked bleak. Almost a year later, after Jim had ordered a mass exodus to Jonestown, in June 1978, an unexpected event shook Jim's control. Deborah Layton, sister to one of the most trusted lieutenants of Jim, managed to defect during an official trip to Georgetown. She alerted authorities to the nightmarish reality in Jonestown, Jim's insanity, the frequent White Night suicide rehearsals, and the hostage-like conditions. Her revelations reached U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan, who, moved by duty, organized a delegation, including NBC journalists, to investigate Jonestown on November 18, 1978. Upon arrival, Jonestown appeared idyllic to Ryan and his team. A concert was in full swing, residents expressed contentment with their lives, and the community seemed a testament to Jim's vision, built from scratch in just 4 years. A paradise, it seemed. However, Just as Ryan was about to depart, the facade cracked. Monica Bagby handed him a desperate note, revealing that she and 16 others were captured in the supposed paradise, longing to escape. This prompted Ryan to confront Jim, leading to a tense negotiation where Jim eventually allowed Ryan, his crew, and the 17 defectors to leave. Although Jones had appeared calm to Ryan, behind the scenes he was absolutely enraged. Jones knew that allowing Ryan and the defectors to depart would mean the end of his control over Jonestown. With no intention of letting that happen, he covertly commanded his armed unit of devout followers, the Red Brigade, to ambush Ryan at the airport. At Port Kaituma airstrip, Ryan, the NBC journalists, and Monica Bagby and her defectors began boarding 2 small planes. Unfortunately for them, the tranquility was shattered by sudden gunfire from the woods. Jones's Red Brigade had followed them all the way from Jonestown, their loyalty to Jim outweighing any sense of humanity. The ambush was a massacre. Congressman Leo Ryan was killed, alongside 2 NBC cameramen and a temple defector, with 10 others wounded in the chaos. Only 5 managed to escape, fleeing into the surviving aircraft, leaving behind a scene of devastation and loss. Back in Jonestown, the atmosphere was one of panic and control. Jim Jones had placed the camp under full lockdown, with loudspeakers blaring warnings of an imminent U.S. military assault. Chaos ensued as he summoned everyone to the dining hall, proclaiming that the only path forward was revolutionary suicide in protest of an inhumane world. He unveiled large bowls of what appeared to be a fruity cocktail, but in reality were vessels of death, laced with lethal doses of Valium and cyanide. Jim urged his followers to die with dignity, and while some, swayed by his charisma or despair, drank willingly, others were coerced by Jones's armed guards. The horror didn't end there. Radio messages instructed other temple outposts, including the headquarters in Georgetown, to follow suit in this white night. Sharon Amos, a cult member at the Georgetown headquarters, complied with chilling obedience. Using a large knife she found, she quickly slit the throats of her 2 youngest children before directing her oldest to kill her and then herself. The aftermath was catastrophic. 918 souls perished, among them 267 children and babies. Despite the apparent compliance, there were signs of resistance and panic. Remarkably, 36 individuals survived by hiding, fleeing into the jungle, or simply not making it into the dining hall in time, where death was served. As for Jim Jones, his wife Marceline, and most of their children, they met their end in Jonestown, though a few managed to escape the horror. Some were away at a basketball tournament, and others, like Suzanne Jones, had distanced themselves from the temple's grasp, remaining safe in California. Jim himself, confronted with the agony of cyanide poisoning, chose instead to end his life with a gunshot. In his final moments, he was heard chastising those who resisted drinking the poison. Ironic when he himself refused cyanide's painful death. Before his death, however, Jim left behind a chilling directive. All the church's assets, exceeding $7 million, were to be donated to the USSR. The fate of these funds, however, remains shrouded in mystery. For decades, the Jonestown Massacre was remembered as the deadliest single loss of American civilian lives in history, a grim record only surpassed by the terrorist attacks on the Twin Towers on September 11, 2001. The question of how Jim Jones could lead so many to their deaths in a mass suicide has haunted many. Some might dismiss his followers as naive or easily led, but this perspective oversimplifies the human tragedy. Others see Jones's influence as fulfilling deep-seated human desires for purpose, equality, a sense of family, and the chance to live in a better world. These followers were not just victims of Jones's manipulation, but of a broader societal failure, where politicians, public figures, and the media initially endorsed or ignored the warning signs of his cult. Jonestown stands as a stark reminder of how charismatic leadership can exploit human vulnerabilities, offering lessons on the dangers of unchecked influence and the importance of critical awareness. It remains one of the most lethal cult tragedies in modern history, a cautionary tale of manipulation, belief, and the devastating consequences of both.
If you liked that video, please consider leaving a like and a thumbs up, and if you have any suggestions for future videos or ways that we can improve, please leave them in the comments below. With that, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you in the next video.